Your mobile website presents unique challenges for SEO. There's specific factors you need to keep in mind to make sure your mobile website can rank correctly in search results. Let's talk about those mobile SEO factors. The first thing we need to keep in mind is mobile friendliness. In 2015, Google rolled out a series of mobile-friendly criteria, things that they're looking at to evaluate if a website is usable on mobile devices. This was the so-called Mobile-Geddon update. So the factors that Google is looking at include things like ensuring that your website's text is readable without having to zoom in, making sure that your content is sized correctly to the screens, that way people don't have to scroll left and right in order to view what's contained on the page. Now, quick note on that one, if you have something on your page that does require left-right scrolling, like a table, that's okay. What they're looking at here is the entirety of the page. They want to make sure that the entirety of the page is appropriately designed for the screen. If you have a table that is designed such that part of it is shown on the mobile screen, but you have to scroll a little left to right in order to see certain other aspects of that table, that's okay. You're still intentionally designing that table for mobile devices. It's usable on mobile devices, and therefore it would pass mobile-friendly considerations. Another factor Google is looking at in these mobile-friendly considerations is how your links are placed. They want to make sure that links are placed far enough apart so that way the correct link can be easily tapped without you accidentally clicking on the wrong link. In other words, these factors Google was looking at were about some of the basics that you should be getting right on your mobile website. If you're not getting those factors right, then Google didn't want to rank websites as highly. Google offers a free mobile-friendly test to evaluate if your website meets these standards. You can also see if your website meets these standards in Google Search Console. I have a separate video where I walk through how you can find the mobile usability report in Google Search Console. The next thing we need to consider is mobile-first indexing. Mobile-first indexing is just what it sounds like. Google is looking at your mobile website first to decide if your website should be included in search results, if it should be indexed. So the biggest question we want to think about with mobile-first indexing is if your mobile and desktop websites are equivalent. Equivalent here doesn't mean identical. You can have differences between your mobile and desktop website, but you want to make sure that everything represented on your desktop website is represented on your mobile website. And that's especially true of your core content, the content that you're expecting Google to rely on to decide if your website should rank in search results. Your core content is also the content that people are probably relying on to decide if they want to convert or engage with your website. So you want to make sure that all that core content is equally represented on both desktop and mobile devices. Now that we've talked about mobile first and mobile friendliness, let's talk about how those apply depending on the type of mobile website you have. Broadly speaking, there are two types of mobile websites: responsive and mobile dedicated. Responsive is by far more common an approach to creating a mobile website these days. With a responsive website, your website has one set of HTML containing one set of text and images and videos, and that same HTML is returned regardless of the device people are using when they visit your website. However, you also have CSS code that styles that HTML differently depending on the device used. So your website is able to respond to the various screen sizes people are using. If somebody comes to your website on a really small mobile screen, they're going to see a smaller version of your website laid out differently. Things might be stacked instead of side by side. But if they come to your website from a larger desktop screen, well, then they're going to see things maybe side by side instead of stacked like they would have on mobile. When it comes to responsive, you're generally going to be okay with mobile first because you have the same HTML, you have the same text, you have the same images being returned despite the device used. So you're already essentially equivalent between devices. You do need to make sure that you're not hiding content on the mobile website in a way that would make it seem like the mobile page isn't equivalent to the desktop version of that page. But so long as you're not doing anything too crazy with hiding content, you should be okay when it comes to mobile first. Now, the alternative to a responsive mobile website is to have a mobile dedicated website. A mobile dedicated website is one where you have different sets of HTML depending on the device used. So you have one set of HTML for mobile devices and another set of HTML for desktop devices. And your server is listening for the people who are coming to your website to see what device they're using. And when they detect what device people are using, they return the device-appropriate HTML code. Now, already you can probably start to see some of the problems that will come up with this. Because you have two different sets of HTML, two different sets of content, two different sets of images being returned depending on the device, it's really easy for these two sets of code and content to fall out of sync. All of a sudden, your mobile about page says something very different than your desktop about page. And because they start to fall out of sync, this creates a pretty big problem for mobile first indexing, where we need mobile and desktop to be equivalent. The other problem with mobile dedicated websites comes up if you're delivering a mobile dedicated website at a separate URL. Sometimes separate URL mobile dedicated websites are called m.dot websites because it's very common for these to be delivered on an m.dot subdomain. So m.yoursite.com contains the mobile website. If you have this setup, one of the biggest problems that can come up with an m.dot website is duplication. And that's because your server is returning two different sets of HTML code for two different types of devices at two different URLs. You have your about page at m.yoursite.com/about for mobile visitors, and you have your about page at yoursite.com/about for desktop visitors. And if you don't handle that correctly, those two different pages will start to compete in search results and will create a duplication problem on your website that you'll want to avoid. Because mobile dedicated websites can run into problems like this with falling out of sync between the two devices or creating duplication across the devices, most people recommend that you use a responsive design, including Google. And on that, I want to point out that just because Google recommends a responsive design does not mean that a responsive design is one of Google's mobile-friendly ranking factors. Rather, Google is saying one way that is easier to achieve mobile first and mobile friendliness is by using a responsive design. But if you use a mobile dedicated website, you can get there as well. It just might be a little harder to do on your end. If you have any questions about mobile SEO or need help improving your mobile website, please let me know. You can email me at matthew@elementive.com. If you liked this video and would like to see more like it, please subscribe. Thank you for watching.